Just want you to know, just so you don't wonder what this red mark is on Jesus's thing, that's a watermark. I stole this off of a website. I hate to tell you that. I do borrow from websites for my pictures. So I'm looking for the picture, not a picture. So this is the one I like for today, and it does have a watermark. So now you know the awful truth. We're going to talk about a human Jesus today, because it's really easy to keep Jesus as a deity. We like Jesus as a deity. You know why we like Jesus as a deity? Because it removes our guilt at not being able to do the things that we've seen him do. But Jesus walked this earth as a human. The whole purpose of his walk on earth was to live as a human so that the sacrifice could be for the humans he was with. Get that down in your head. He had to be here as a human and walk out this life so that this sacrifice would be capable of cleansing all of our sins from then till now, for all time. So I chose today for more human than humanity. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means, because I believe that Jesus wasn't just human, but he was more human. That he was the most human that ever humaned. Because he was, and I'm going to tell you why here in a second. But I wanted to read this quote from Eugene Peterson. He said, "Jesus was so obviously human, but this has never been an easy truth for people to swallow. There are always plenty of people walking around who have none of this particularity. Human ordinariness. Wow, I cannot talk today. Sorry. Bodily fluids, raw emotions of anger and disgust, fatigue and loneliness." Do you think about Jesus like that? Do you realize that Jesus would walk alongside the road and, maybe he took a little bit too much of the stream and he would go to the bathroom just like everybody else? Do you realize that? Is that flipping your wig? And we're not going to talk about number 2, because that would be too much for y'all. But we know Jesus did it because he mentioned it one time. He said just what we take in it goes in our body, it's processed, and it comes out. So Jesus acknowledged that he did do this. Did you know that? Did you know that he had emotions just like you? We're going to talk about that today. That there were emotions there that Jesus used, but he wasn't controlled by his emotions, just like many of we are. He knew the line. It's a human Jesus. He was here, perfectly human, perfectly divine. Let's go into our verses today. We're going to say, what kind of emotions did Jesus experience? Well, one of the first we find out is that he experienced fatigue. He experienced fatigue. There's a story that comes in John 4, and it's about Jesus has walked a while. And it says, eventually, he came to the Samaritan village of Sychar, near the field that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. So in other words, it was God's people's place. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired from the long walk, sat wearily beside the well about noontime. Jesus gets tired like you or me. He didn't have this divine ability to just walk for days on end. He gets tired. He says, I need to sit here. And you know what it says he did? It says he waited till someone came along to give him a drink. He needed a drink. He needed to be refreshed. I don't know if any of you all ever worked outside. There's farmers here. I would assume you all have. But there comes a time when the only thing that will do you is a nice cold glass of water. And Jesus decided to sit beside the well until somebody with a bucket could get him some water. Did you ever think about that? He needed water. It feels weird to talk about a deity like that a deity would need water. But if Jesus was human and his body processed the ways that are processed, then he would need water. It's said that we could only go 3 days without water. Apparently that applied to Jesus too. Scary stuff. Jesus was human like me. What other kinds of emotions did Jesus experience? Well, we're told he experienced grief. And I'm not going to go to the one that you think I'm going to go to. Next verse. We have this story. Something happened. John, his cousin, was beheaded in the prison. And his head was brought on a tray and given to the girl. There was a girl who danced for the king, and he, being a man of carnal pleasures, said, I'll give you anything if you'll just, because of how great you are. You're awesome, baby. That's what this king said. And her mother didn't like John. You know why? Because John was whispering in the king's ear. He was saying that their illicit relation wasn't right. He said, King, you shouldn't have killed your brother and taken his wife. And I guarantee you that wife, she liked being the wife of a king. She didn't want John messing up what she had. And so she saw this as the perfect opportunity to get rid of God's voice in the king's ear. Because what if he started listening to him? And so she told her daughter to ask for John's head. And the king, being a man of his word, went and had John killed. Put his head on a platter and presented it to the girl. Keep going. Later, John's disciples came for his body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus what had happened. And as soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. But the crowds heard where he was headed and followed on foot for many towns. Jesus experienced grief. Now, I don't know about all of y'all, but I'm sure many of you have experienced grief. Have you ever wanted to have the world stop being around? You just wish everybody would be quiet. Jesus wished everybody would just be quiet, that he could get away and process this grief of John. But because of who Jesus was, people started following him. See, Jesus had a problem. He was the best show in town. And people who want to see a show, they'll go wherever they go. I just was watching one of the TikTok guys, and he was talking about how people just randomly come up to his house and want to talk to him because they've seen him on TikTok. And he said, I don't know you from Adam. And he was doing a PSA saying, if you bring me something, I will throw it away because I don't know you from Adam. He said, I don't want to encourage this type of behavior. Well, Jesus was living even more of that because there's thousands of TikTok stars. There was only one Jesus. He was the only one going around doing what he did. So he was the biggest show in town. And people see Jesus trying to get away, and they start chasing him down. What do they care that his cousins died? You live out here with us. We have a right to know your life. We're coming after you. And amazingly, what I didn't show in this is what happened after this is Jesus began to teach. And he taught for so long that people couldn't eat. And then he honored John the Baptist by having them sit down and taking a few loaves and fishes and feeding 5,000 people. Just as John had fed them when they came out to him in the desert, baptizing all that came to him, Jesus fed them when they came out to see him in the wilderness place. He honored John in his grief. Because the disciples were all about, let's turn them back away, let's get them back in their towns. I'll go have to go out and get something to eat. And Jesus said, no, they're going to get faint. He said, they're not going to be able to make it to town to get something to eat. He said, we're going to feed them. Jesus was human. He not only showed, I have grief, I want to go be alone, but then he showed, I have compassion on the people that follow me. He wasn't like a lot of stars that are like, oh, hey, no, thank you for coming to hear me. Thank you for paying your $200 for your ticket, but that's the end of our transaction. No, Jesus said, Hey, sit down. We're going to eat. He was human. He saw needs, and he went and met them and put his own needs on the back burner. Have you ever done that? It's hard. We're selfish people. We like to take care of ourselves. We like to be able to have an excuse to shut people out. But sometimes you meet people, and I see this in the hospital all the time, people that are taking care of other people to the detriment of their own health. They're taking care of them even though it's killing them. It's a special kind of love to be able to do that. And Jesus was exhibiting it. He was exhibiting it. He was saying, let me put my own grief aside and take care of you all and feed you spiritual food and then feed you real food. Wow. Let's keep going. We said he had fatigue and he had grief, but did you know that Jesus also had anger? This is one of my favorite examples of Jesus being human. You know why? You'll see here in a minute, because I do the exact same thing. Probably not in the same way he was doing it, but about stuff. Let's go to the verse. He says, one day the Pharisees and the Sadducees came to test Jesus, demanding that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. Dance, clown! You have to prove to us. So Jesus gave one of his typical answers. And he says, I don't dance to your tune. You're supposed to be dancing to my Father's tune, and yet you've chosen to dance to your own tune, thinking you have authority over everybody. And guess what? So Jesus does that, but then we skip down here to 5, and this is what I love about him, right here. It says, later, as they crossed the other side of the lake, the disciples discovered they had forgotten to bring any bread. Watch out, Jesus warned them. Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Do you see what's happened here? They have crossed a whole lake. Jesus has talked to the Pharisees and Sadducees, and they have crossed the whole lake. And what happens? Jesus is still mad. He's stewing, as we used to call it. He's just sitting there stewing, and it's making him madder. But unlike me, who stews about stupid things, Jesus is stewing because people have taken his dad's words and are acting like they're now the authorities of it and completely messing up the message. This would be the same as if Ron White, a good friend of ours, some of you met him, some of you haven't, but my dad helped him out of a bad time. And he held Bible studies there. He spoke into Ron. He helped Ron see what the Word says. And Ron is now a preacher. And this would be the same thing as if Ron was down there yelling at his congregation, saying, I'm doing this just as my pastor used to do it to me. Now, many of you know that we're blessed to be here when my dad was in the pulpit. He wasn't an angry man. He loved being your pastor. He didn't preach. If he did preach hellfire and damnation, I don't remember it. And I feel like I would know because I think I heard most of his sermons. But that would be the same thing as if Ron was doing that down there. Now, Ron doesn't. If he ever sees this, I'm just using him because he was a person I know my dad personally poured into. Jesus sees these Pharisees and Sadducees turning God's word into a profit scheme, going around inspecting how much money do you owe God, looking at widows and saying, ooh, hey, listen, I know you've only got 2 mites, I need one of them. And Jesus is angry. He's still stewing. He's pretty upset. We go on with the story, and it's kind of a funny interaction Because, I mean, you know, they could tell he's upset. I mean, obviously he's upset because of what happens in the rest of the story. It says, as this, they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. They're upset because they feel like one of them has failed, and now Jesus is mad. You went and made Jesus mad. Jeez, John, come on. Jesus knew what they were saying, so he said, you have so little faith. Why are you arguing with each other about having no bread? Don't you understand even yet? Don't you remember the 5,000 I fed with 5 loaves and the baskets of leftovers you picked up? Or the 4,000 I fed with 7 loaves and the large baskets of leftovers you picked up? Bread doesn't mean anything to me. You need to be paying attention to the important things. These men are maligning my Father's word. They just go around preaching to people, telling them it's of God, and it's nowhere near God. They live in their fancy houses. They wouldn't know what it's like to be in these streets if they got turned out tomorrow. They don't even go around the streets. They just like to live in that church up there. As far as they can stay away from the people, they stay away from the people. And here I am, an actual son of God. I go around and I'm showing that God wants to be among the people. And many of them hasn't even stepped that foot out of the city. He is upset. It's the same as if somebody was maligning your father and saying that this is what he would have wanted. Think about that. That's the type of upset Jesus is. It happens. Keep going. Why can't you understand that I'm not talking about bread? So again I say, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and Sadducees. He would tell us the same thing here today. Beware of the yeast of people that are trying to take everything you have in the name of God. Beware of people speaking for God that aren't of God. Once again, I always point back to the Bereans. Paul said they searched those scriptures daily to make sure that I wasn't taking the word of God out of context. Any good pastor would tell you that. Search those scriptures. Understand them. That's the best thing that you can do for people, to keep people from taking advantage of you. And the scriptures is life, and the scriptures is wisdom. Let's keep going. We got a busy day today. Jesus showed empathy. Jesus showed empathy. Now we're going to go to that one you thought I was going to go to for grief. We're going to go to that one because it actually is empathy that he's dealing with here. He says, when Jesus saw her weeping, that'd be Mary, he said he saw the other people wailing with her. A deep anger welled up within him. And that's literally how that reads. I know the King James uses other words, but it's actually a deep anger. It says moved, or some, if I remember right, the King James says he was deeply moved. But it actually means that there was a deep anger that came up out of him, and he was deeply troubled. In other words, things weren't right in his spirit. We don't know why he's angry here. We don't know if it's because he felt like his people should know that when Jesus comes on the scene, things change. That he feels like he's not been seen by the people that know him best. But did they not know that he was there a purpose? He even told the disciples, I need to go over there to raise our friend Lazarus. And they go, well, just tell Mary to wake him up. He says, no, he's dead. And he told them earlier on in one of the other books, he said, I need to go over there to wake him up. He knew what was coming. And yet everybody is so distraught. How could a man like Lazarus pass away? How could Lazarus be dead? Oh my gosh, this is awful. The thing we've greatly feared has come upon us. And Jesus said, do you not know me yet? This was right at the end of his ministry, near the end. He said, do you not know me yet? That when I come on the scene, things change. if I represent the law and the prophets, and I claim to be the greatest prophet, then don't you think that bones have to raise, just like when the man's bones hit Elisha's bones? He was deeply troubled. He said, "Where have you put him?" he asked them. And they told him, "Well, Lord, come and see." They were well into the process. They had him in the grave already. He was already in there. They had the tomb sealed up. He was already in there. Next verse. And then Jesus wept. He wept. He showed human emotion. Why people are upset. And what didn't I do to let them know that when I come on the scene, things change? And he was sad. He said the people who were standing nearby said, "See how much he loved him." But some said, "This man healed a blind man. Couldn't he have kept Lazarus from dying?" They knew the power, and yet they don't know why Jesus is there. Why do I say he was more human than human? Why do I say that? Because in each of these instances that we have just talked about, Jesus showed that he was more human than the people around him. See, if we go back to our original example, he showed he was more human than what the woman at the well was used to. See, she was a woman that had some loose morals. And in Jewish times, you don't deal, you shun them, you put them out of the city, except for the men that want to have relations with her. See, that was a problem, and yet Jesus is sitting there, and he didn't want what every other man that would actually talk to her wanted. He came to set her free. He didn't see her as sullied and unneeded and just awful and against God. No, he sat there and he talked to her and said, "You can be redeemed." In his grief, the people showed that they don't want to respect his time of grieving, that they expect him to perform, that they want him to do. They showed that because they chased him while he was trying to grieve. And yet Jesus showed he was more human than human, because he said, "Let me minister to the people even in my grief. Let me put aside my own needs and help people find theirs." We go to the next one. And he can't understand how the message got so twisted. He feels that the message that God gave was very self-explanatory, and yet these men have taken it and turned it into the beautiful robes that they wear and the nice houses that they've lived in and all these other things. And he's trying to fathom that, how this could be. Lastly, here in Lazarus, he had spent all this time with this family. And he had done nothing wrong to them. He had been a good guest. He had done things there, and they had seen things, and they had talked about things, and yet they still couldn't understand who it was that was sitting here. That he was the answer and not the problem that they thought. As we come into a time of communion. That's right. We are there, right? Yeah. Sorry. Sometimes I lose track of my notes. As we come into this time of communion, communion shows Jesus' humanity the most. Do you get this? It shows his humanity the most. Jesus decided on the last night of his earth, he wanted to be surrounded by the people that meant the most of him. He wanted them around them. You want to come up, Trey? He wanted them to be surrounded by them, and he wanted to share this meal to give them comfort, not for the 3 days that they were getting ready to have, but for when he goes back to heaven and they don't have him anymore. He wanted them to have that comfort, to know that every time that they take that bread and they drink the wine, that it was a connection to this Jesus. As we come out in the center to take communion, my ushers are going to pass out the communion. I want us to think. We're going to take some time and contemplate what this communion means. We're not just going to do this quickly like I usually do, read a few verses and we walk out the door. I want us to take a little time in communion today.